Have you ever wondered how big companies like Google and Amazon are able to have consistent log field names for all their services across different tech stacks and different frameworks? 2 words, semantic conventions. And I'm going to show you how you can apply this to your project right now. But first, what are semantic conventions? These are a set of rules that standardize how things should be named and structured. So in the case of logs, these are the fields: what's optional, what's required, and what should we name them. But when it comes to observability, you don't just deal with logs, there are also traces and metrics. So in order to stop you from having endless team meetings about how to name things, a company called Elastic came along with the Elastic Common Schema in 2018, which solved the problem, but just for Elastic users. Because if you've never used any of the Elastic products, you probably wouldn't have even heard of ECS, let alone know how to implement it. So in 2023, they merged ECS with the OTel semantic conventions, which in my opinion is much better because it's open, it's vendor agnostic and led by the community, meaning people can suggest and change things. Cool. With that explanation out of the way, let's go ahead and look into how you can implement the OTel semantic conventions. The OpenTelemetry semantic conventions are applied automatically to any OTel SDKs or any OTel instrumentation component. But where they come in super handy is when you're writing your own custom metric, traces, or any other event used for observability. So let's do that. Let's apply these conventions to some custom traces and metrics. This is a simple app that gives a random dice roll number based on the URL query param. It uses the OTel Node SDK for instrumentation and has a custom trace and metric that is used as middleware. Now, if you're unfamiliar with TypeScript or even the Hono framework, don't worry, these aren't important things to know for this video. But even without that knowledge, you can see some non-standard names have been applied here. You can see we have a kind of one, we have attributes of key, which contains the query param, which probably isn't the best name, but anyway, if we scroll down and have a look at the metric, we can see we have a root here of the full path with the JSON stringified query params. All this is a bit weird, so let's fix it. Let's focus on the trace. The OTel documentation says that tracer names should contain the instrumentation scope, such as the instrumentation library. So HTTP server isn't going to cut it. Instead, we can change it to this, which contains the implementation being used as well as the version number. Now, when it comes to the span down here, again, the name for a HTTP span should contain the method and the target. And if we scroll down a tiny bit from here, we can see we have some required attributes. So I'm going to zoom out to make it more obvious and scroll up a tiny bit. And we can see we have 4 required attributes: the HTTP request method, server address, server port, and URL full. We can see down here they say required, and they also have their stability, which is stable. There are actually 3 different types of stability values. Stable, meaning the value is unlikely to change in the future. Experimental, meaning the value might change in the future. And deprecated, meaning the value has been changed or removed. Now, these 4 are stable, which is great, meaning we can go back to the code and update them to contain these attributes. By the way, if you want to know more about traces and spans, we have a video that goes through them in detail. There should be a link for that video in the description. Anyway, back to the code. So let's replace all this code with this, making sure to import span kind. This new code changes the start span to get HTTP root. It changes the kind from 1 to span kind server, and it has the 4 required attributes up here with 1 optional attribute at the bottom. Nice. Next, we need to change these 2 event names, which, yes, there are semantic conventions for event names as well. Event names actually have the same rules as attribute names, so they should be in a format that looks like this, which means we have to update this part of the code to something like this, and that looks much better. Metrics follow a similar pattern, but also have some required metrics you need to add. So for HTTP metrics, if we scroll down, we can see that this HTTP server request duration is actually a required metric. So I need to add this one along with my custom one. But Since this one encapsulates what I'm capturing in my custom one already, I'll just replace my custom one with this one. So let's replace all this code with this new code. Cool. We've changed the meter name here to match the format we have for our trace. We've also given our metric a proper semantic convention name. We've added some units, and we've added the required attributes. Now, looking at the terminal, we can see the format for our trace over here, and our metric down here is better than what we had before. Now let's talk about logs. But before we do that, it's one thing looking at metrics as text in a terminal, but it's much better to look at them through a UI as dashboards, and you can do that with BetterStack. In fact, BetterStack provide a bunch of ready-made dashboards that you can use right away for things like OpenTelemetry, Prometheus, and Postgres. Now, BetterStack do have a free tier, but the cost of their metrics is so cheap, it actually makes more sense to use that than to go and self-host something like Prometheus on your own servers. So go and check it out. Okay, we're back. Now, when it comes to semantic conventions for logs, it's best to keep what you already have. So Nginx logs, Apache logs, whatever, just keep them and use a tool like Vector to take these logs and change their field names. Now, if this is the first time you're hearing of Vector, stop this video now and go and watch the video that talks about unstructured logs to structured logs using Vector. As usual, there's a link for it in the description. Okay, I know the focus of this video has been on OTel semantic conventions, but the documentation for logs focuses on log attributes, not top-level log fields. And I know OTel has documentation on a log data model, which does contain some top-level fields. But if I'm being completely honest, the documentation for ECS is much better when it comes to logs. So I suggest you check that out first. Now, I know ECS has merged with the OTel semantic convention, so in the future, the documentation for logs might be a bit more fully formed. But for now, I'd say stick with ECS until they iron out the details. Unless, of course, you're using the OTel logs SDK, which might have this information already figured out. Anyway, if you want a deeper dive into logs with ECS or OCSF, then you should probably go ahead and subscribe.